Welcome to Infidelity Stories. Please like this video and subscribe. We're grateful for each and every one of you. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. My stepson's first time. And I was involved. The key turned in the lock with a soft click, and I pushed the door open, stepping into the cool, dimly lit apartment. The grocery bags in my hands were heavy, the plastic handles digging into my palms. But I barely noticed. I'd left work early, unable to focus, my mind buzzing with a vague sense of unease. The apartment was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the city outside. I set the bags on the kitchen counter, the thud of canned goods hitting the marble echoing through the space. As I began unpacking, a faint sound caught my attention, a rhythmic, almost melodic noise coming from down the hall. It wasn't loud, but it was persistent, a low murmur of voices and something else I couldn't quite place. I paused, a box of pasta in my hand, and listened. The sound was coming from Robert's room. My stepson was home, which wasn't unusual, but the nature of the noise was unsettling. Curiosity gnawed at me, mingling with a growing sense of dread. What was going on in there? I stepped into the hallway, my heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor. The sound grew clearer as I approached Robert's door, breaths, low and urgent, punctuated by soft moans. My heart began to race, my palms damp with sweat. I shouldn't go in, I knew I shouldn't, but some inexplicable pull, pushed me forward. I reached for the doorknob, hesitating for a moment before turning it slowly. The door creaked open and I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn, casting a soft golden glow over the scene. Robert and Junior were on the bed entangled in each other, their bodies moving in a rhythm that was achingly intimate. The air was thick with the scent of their passion, warm and musky, with a hint of something sweet, like vanilla. Robert's eyes snapped open, locking onto mine. For a moment time seemed to stand still. His expression shifted from bliss to shock, his lips parting as if to say something, but no words came out. Junior let out a small gasp, her cheeks flushing crimson as she grabbed the blanket and pulled it over herself. "Oh my God," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to." I didn't finish the sentence, I couldn't. My face burned with embarrassment as I stepped back, slamming the door shut behind me. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears as I retreated to the kitchen. I leaned against the counter, my hands trembling as I tried to process what I'd just seen. Robert, my stepson, and Junior, his girlfriend, together. Like that. The image was seared into my mind, vivid and inescapable. I felt a pang of guilt, knowing I'd invaded their privacy, but there was something else. Something I couldn't quite name. A strange, unwelcome heat that spread through me, making my skin tingle. I grabbed a glass from the cabinet and filled it with water, gulping it down in an attempt to calm my racing heart. What was I supposed to do now? Pretend it never happened? Address it head on? The thought of talking to Robert about it made my stomach turn. I busied myself with unpacking the groceries, trying to push the incident out of my mind, but it lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. The sounds, the smells, the look on Robert's face, they haunted me, replaying in my mind over and over. As I put the last can of soup in the pantry, I heard footsteps in the hallway. My breath hitched and I froze, bracing myself for the inevitable confrontation. But the footsteps passed by, heading toward the bathroom, and I let out a shaky sigh of relief. For now, all I could do was wait and hope that the heat in my cheeks would fade before I had to see them again. I stood at the stove, stirring the pot of pasta sauce absent-mindedly, my thoughts still tangled in the awkwardness of the afternoon. The apartment smelled of garlic and tomatoes, a comforting aroma that did little to ease the tension coiled in my chest. The sound of a door opening down the hall made my hand freeze mid-stir. Robert and Junior were coming out of his room. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus on the food. The last thing I needed was to burn dinner on top of everything else. I heard their footsteps approaching the kitchen, their soft murmurs barely audible over the sizzle of the sauce. "Hey," Robert said, his voice tentative as he stepped into the kitchen. I turned, forcing a smile onto my face. "Hey, dinner's almost ready." He nodded, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jeans. Junior stood behind him, her arms crossed over her chest, her face still flushed from earlier. She offered me a small, awkward smile, and I responded with what I hoped was a reassuring nod. "Smells good," Junior said, her voice soft. "Thanks," I replied, turning back to the stove. "It's just pasta, nothing fancy." The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I busied myself with serving the food, hoping the act of moving would dispel some of the tension. When I turned back, Robert and Junior were already seated at the table, their eyes downcast, their hands fidgeting. I set the plates down and took my seat, the chairs scraping loudly against the floor. The clinking of utensils filled the room as we began to eat, the silence almost unbearable. I glanced up at Robert, who was poking at his food with his fork, his jaw tight. Junior sat beside him, her shoulders hunched, her gaze fixed on her plate. The sound of a fork scraping against porcelain made me wince. I cleared my throat, searching for anything to say. "So, how was your day?" I asked, my voice too loud in the quiet room. Robert looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Fine, yours?" "Busy," I replied, taking a sip of wine. "Work's been hectic." He nodded, and silence settled over us again. I took another sip of wine, the cool liquid doing little to calm my nerves. After what felt like an eternity, Robert cleared his throat. "Did you hear about that storm they're predicting for the weekend?" I blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift in topic. "Oh yeah, I heard something about that." He leaned back in his chair, a small smirk playing on his lips. "Guess we're all gonna be stuck inside, better stock up on snacks." Junior let out a soft laugh, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Or board games. Remember that time we tried to play Monopoly?" Robert groaned, rolling his eyes. "Don't remind me. I still owe you like $1 million. I chuckled, the tension in the room finally beginning to ease. Monopoly's a dangerous game. I've seen friendships end over it. Robert grinned, his usual confidence returning. "Yeah, well, Junior's ruthless. I'm pretty sure she's secretly an accountant." Junior smirked, nudging him with her elbow. "Someone's gotta keep you in check." We laughed, the sound light and genuine, and for a moment the awkwardness of the afternoon seemed to fade. As the meal progressed, the conversation flowed more naturally. We talked about work, the latest headlines, and a movie we'd all seen recently. It felt normal. Almost. But as I refilled my wine glass, the memory of what I'd walked in on earlier crept back into my mind. The way they'd been tangled together, the look on Robert's face when he saw me. It was impossible to forget. I glanced at them, their heads close together as they whispered something to each other, and felt a strange mix of curiosity and discomfort stirring inside me. The wine had loosened my tongue, and before I could stop myself, I leaned forward, my voice low but firm. "You know, there are some specifics you two could improve on." The words hung in the air, heavy and charged. Robert and Junior froze, their eyes widening as they turned to look at me. The room fell silent, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator. "What do you mean?" Robert asked, his voice cautious. I hesitated, realizing too late that I'd crossed a line. But there was no turning back now. "I mean," I said, choosing my words carefully. "If you're going to do it, you might as well do it right." Junior's face flushed, and Robert stared at me, his expression unreadable. For a moment I thought I'd ruined everything. The fragile peace we just found. But then he chuckled, shaking his head. "Wow, Michelle," he said, smirking. "Didn't know you were an expert." I raised an eyebrow, trying to hide my nerves. "I've been around the block a few times." Junior giggled, her embarrassment fading. "Well, maybe you could give us some pointers." The comment caught me off guard, and I laughed, the tension in the room dissolving once again. But as the conversation shifted back to lighter topics, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. A boundary had been crossed, and I wasn't sure what it meant. For them, or for me. The days that followed were strange. A heavy, unspoken tension lingered in the air, like the quiet before a storm. Robert and Junior avoided bringing up the topic of that dinner conversation, and so did I. But it was there, lurking beneath the surface of every interaction. I'd catch Robert glancing at me when he thought I wasn't looking, his expression a mix of curiosity and something else I couldn't quite place. Junior would blush whenever our eyes met, her gaze darting away quickly. The air between us felt charged electric. As if we were all waiting for something. Anything. To happen. I told myself to let it go. It wasn't my place to meddle in their relationship, no matter how much that dinner conversation had opened their door. But the memory of what I'd seen, what I'd said, kept replaying in my mind. And then, there was the book. I'd found it in the back of my closet, buried under a pile of old photo albums and forgotten knickknacks. It was a book about lovemaking, one I'd bought years ago during a phase when I'd been trying to spice things up in my own marriage. I'd never actually read it, but the title alone seemed promising. One afternoon, while Robert and Junior were out, I left the book on the coffee table, its cover facing down to avoid drawing too much attention. I told myself it was just a suggestion, a gentle nudge in the right direction. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. That evening I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner when Robert walked in, the book in his hand. My heart skipped a beat, but I forced myself to keep my focus on the cutting board. "Michelle?" he said, his voice uncertain. I looked up, feigning surprise. Hey Robert, what's up? He held up the book, his expression unreadable. Is this yours? I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. Oh yeah, I found it while cleaning out my closet, thought it might be helpful. He raised an eyebrow, his lips twitching into a small smirk. Helpful, huh? I shrugged, turning back to the vegetables. Just thought you might find it interesting. He was silent for a moment, and I could feel his eyes on me. Then he stepped closer, leaning against the counter. Have you read it? I shook my head, keeping my gaze fixed on the cutting board. No, like I said, I just found it. He hummed, flipping through the pages. It's detailed. I chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. Well, that's the point, isn't it? He was quiet again, and I could feel the tension building between us. Then he cleared his throat. Junior and I were talking. And we thought maybe you could give us some advice. My stomach dropped and I turned to face him, my knife still in hand. Advice? He nodded, his expression serious now. You know, like you said at dinner, if you're up for it. I stared at him, my mind racing. This wasn't what I'd expected, not at all. But the idea intrigued me, sparking a curiosity I couldn't ignore. Are you serious? I asked, trying to gauge his reaction. He shrugged, his smirk returning. Why not? You've got the experience, right? I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. This was a line I'd never thought I'd cross, but the thought of saying no felt wrong. Okay? I said finally, my voice steady despite the nerves churning in my stomach. I'll help you. The tension between us shifted, becoming something deeper, more charged. Robert's smirk widened and he nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. Great, he said, his voice low. We'll let you know when we're ready. He turned and walked out of the kitchen, the book still in his hand. I stood there, my heart racing, the knife still clenched in my hand. What had I just agreed to? The first session was awkward. I sat in the corner of Robert's room, perched on a chair I'd brought in from the kitchen, trying to look as composed as possible. The room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn to block out the evening sun, and the air felt heavy with anticipation. Robert and Junior were on the bed, their bodies close but not yet touching, their eyes flickering nervously toward me. Okay, I said, my voice steady despite the knot of unease in my stomach. Let's start with the basics. They nodded, their expressions a mix of embarrassment and determination. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay clinical, detached. This wasn't about me, it was about helping them. Communication is key, I began, my tone professional. Talk to each other, let each other know what feels good and what doesn't. Robert and Junior exchanged a glance, then nodded again, their movement stiff. Okay, Robert said, his voice slightly unsure. We can do that. Junior gave him a small smile, her fingers brushing against his. Yeah. Let's try. The tension in the room was palpable as they began to undress. Robert pulled off his shirt, revealing his lean, muscular frame, the faint sheen of sweat already glistening on his skin. Junior followed, her hands trembling slightly as she unbuttoned her blouse. I averted my gaze momentarily, feeling a strange mix of discomfort and curiosity. They were vulnerable, exposed, and yet there was a quiet confidence in the way they moved. Junior's bra fell to the floor, revealing her soft, delicate curves, while Robert's jeans were discarded, leaving him in just his boxers. The room grew warmer, the air thick with the scent of their desire. I cleared my throat, trying to maintain my composure. Go slow, I instructed, my voice softer now. Touch her gently, Robert, don't rush. He nodded, his eyes locked on Junior's as he reached out to cup her face, his thumb brushing against her cheek. She leaned into his touch, her breath hitching as he leaned in to kiss her. Their movements were cautious at first, almost tentative, but as they followed my guidance they began to relax, their bodies moving together in a rhythm that was both hesitant and beautiful. Good, I said, my voice steady despite the heat creeping up my cheeks. Now Junior, guide him, show him what you like. She nodded, her hands sliding down his chest as she leaned in to whisper something in his ear. Robert's eyes darkened, his hands moving to her waist as he responded to her cues. The session continued, the room growing warmer and more intimate with each passing moment. I offered feedback when needed, pointing out nuances and encouraging them to explore new dynamics. Try this, I suggested at one point, gesturing to Robert. Use your hands more, touch her here. He followed my instruction, his movements growing more confident as he explored Junior's body. She gasped, her back arching as he touched her in a way that clearly resonated with her. That's it, I murmured, my voice low and encouraging. Just like that. Over time the sessions became more frequent, and Robert and Junior grew more comfortable with my presence. The atmosphere in the room became increasingly charged, the connection between them, and by extension, me, deepening with each passing moment. One evening, after a particularly intense session, something shifted. Robert stepped away from Junior, his breathing heavy, his skin glistening with sweat. He turned to me, his eyes dark with something I couldn't quite name. "Michelle," he said, his voice low and husky. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "Yes?" He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. Before I could react, he leaned in and kissed me, his lips warm and insistent. The world seemed to stop, my mind racing with a jumble of thoughts and emotions. I should have pulled away. I should have stopped him. But I didn't. The heat of his body, the intensity of his kiss. It was too much, too overwhelming. I felt myself leaning into him, my hands trembling as they reached for his shoulders. Just as I thought the moment couldn't get any more intense, I felt another presence beside me. Junior had moved closer, her hands resting on my hips as she leaned in to kiss me as well. Her lips were soft, her touch hesitant, but full of curiosity. The double sensation. Robert's firm demanding kiss and Junior's gentle exploratory one was almost too much to bear. My mind raced, my body responding instinctively as I kissed them both, the boundaries between us blurring until they were almost indistinguishable. When they finally pulled away, I was left breathless, my mind reeling. I stared at them, my heart pounding, my thoughts a chaotic swirl of confusion and desire. "Michelle?" Junior whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't respond, unable to find the words. The room was silent, the air thick with tension. I had no idea what this meant for them, for me. But I knew one thing, nothing would ever be the same. The kiss ignited a fire within me, a wave of emotions that I couldn't and didn't want to ignore. Robert's hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer, his touch firm yet gentle. His lips were insistent, demanding, and I found myself responding instinctively, my hands gripping his shoulders for support. Junior was already nearby, her presence palpable. She didn't say anything, but her gaze was intense, her breath hitching as she watched us. Out of the corner of my eye I could see her shifting her weight from one foot to the other, her fingers twisting the hem of her shirt. "Michelle?" Robert murmured against my lips, his voice low and husky. I pulled back slightly, my mind racing. "Robert, we shouldn't." He silenced me with another kiss, his hands sliding down to my hips. "Yes, we should." I felt a surge of guilt, but it was quickly drowned out by the desire coursing through me. My body was responding in ways I couldn't control, my heart pounding in my chest. Before I could protest further, I felt Junior's hand on my arm, her touch warm and tentative. "Michelle," she said softly, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "It's okay." I turned to look at her, my breath catching in my throat. Her eyes were wide, her lips slightly parted, and there was a vulnerability in her expression that made my heart ache. Her fingers brushed against my skin, sending a shiver down my spine. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her cheeks flushed. I want this." Robert's arms tightened around me, his breath warm against my ear. "We both do." The room felt impossibly small, the air thick with anticipation. My mind was screaming at me to stop, to walk away, but my body had other ideas. Slowly, hesitantly, I allowed them to guide me to the bed, my heart racing with every step. Junior sat down on the edge of the bed first, her hands reaching out to pull me toward her. As I sat beside her, Robert knelt in front of me, his hands moving to my face as he kissed me again, his lips warm and insistent. At the same time, Junior leaned in, her lips brushing against my neck, her breath hot against my skin. The sensation was overwhelming, my mind spinning as I tried to process everything. Robert's hands were everywhere, his touch firm and confident, while Junior's was soft, exploratory. "Michelle?" Junior whispered against my skin, her voice trembling. "Is this okay?" I nodded, my breath hitching. "Yes." The room was alive with sensation, every touch, every breath, every whispered word amplified in the dim light. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts, but my body was fully present, responding to the heat between us in ways I couldn't control. Robert's hands were everywhere, his touch both familiar and foreign. He kissed me with a hunger that left me breathless, his lips trailing down my neck, my collarbone, every inch of my skin tingling under his attention. His fingers traced the curve of my waist, the dip of my hip, his movements deliberate and confident. I could feel the strength in his hands, the way he held me as if he never wanted to let go. Junior was beside me, her presence adding another layer of complexity to the moment. Her touch was softer, more tentative but no less electrifying. She kissed my shoulder, her lips warm against my skin, her fingers intertwining with mine. There was a quiet intensity in her gaze, a vulnerability that made my heart ache. "Michelle," she whispered again, her voice trembling. "Are you sure?" I nodded, my throat tight. Yes, I'm sure. Her smile was soft, almost shy, and she leaned in to kiss me again, her lips brushing against mine in a way that felt both innocent and deeply intimate. Robert's hands were still moving, his touch sending waves of pleasure through me, and the combination of the two was overwhelming. The room was filled with the sounds of our passion, the ragged breathing, the soft rustle of sheets, the occasional gasp or moan. The air was thick with the scent of sweat and arousal, the heat between us almost unbearable. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the moment. My reservations, my guilt, my fear, it all faded into the background, leaving only the raw, unfiltered connection between us. This was wrong, I knew that. But in that moment, it felt right. Robert's hands moved to the buttons of my blouse, his fingers trembling slightly as he undid them one by one. I felt exposed, vulnerable, but also strangely liberated. His eyes met mine, and there was something in his gaze that made my heart skip a beat, a mix of curiosity, desire, and something deeper, something I couldn't quite name. Junior's hands joined his, her touch gentle and reassuring. She leaned in to kiss my shoulder, her lips warm against my skin, her breath hot and steady. You're beautiful, she whispered, her voice soft but filled with sincerity. I felt a lump form in my throat, my cheeks burning with a mix of embarrassment and pleasure. So are you, I replied, my voice shaky. Robert's lips trailed down my neck, his hands exploring my body with a confidence that was both thrilling and intimidating. At the same time, Junior's fingers traced patterns on my skin, her touch light but electrifying. The sensation was overwhelming, my mind spinning as I tried to process everything. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, teetering between fear and exhilaration. Michelle. Robert murmured against my skin, his voice low and husky. Let go. I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing. Then with a deep breath, I closed my eyes and surrendered. The connection between us was undeniable, the chemistry between the three of us electric. It was as if we were three puzzle pieces, each one incomplete on their own but perfect when put together. As the evening progressed, the boundaries between us dissolved, the lines blurring until we were no longer separate entities but a tangled, intimate trio. The room was filled with the sounds of our passion, the heat between us almost unbearable. When it was over, we lay tangled together, our breathing slowly returning to normal. The room was silent, the air heavy with the weight of what had just happened. I turned to look at Robert and Junior, their faces flushed and their eyes shining with something I couldn't quite name. Michelle. Junior said softly, her hand resting on my arm. Are you okay? I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. Yes. Are you? She smiled, her expression soft. More than okay. Robert reached over, his fingers brushing against my cheek. This changes everything, doesn't it? I hesitated, my mind racing. Yes, I said finally, but I don't regret it. Neither did they. And in that moment, that was all that mattered. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting a warm golden glow over the kitchen. I stood at the counter, my hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee, the rich aroma grounding me in the moment. My mind was still reeling from the events of the previous night, the memory of their touch, their warmth, their desire, lingering like a turn, my heart skipping a beat as Robert entered the room. His hair was tousled, his shirt rumpled, and there was a softness in his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. He gave me a small tentative smile as he grabbed a mug from the cabinet and poured himself a cup of coffee. Morning, he said, his voice low and rough with sleep. Morning, I replied, my voice steady despite the nervous flutter in my chest. Junior appeared a moment later, her hair pulled back into a loose braid, her face free of makeup. She looked radiant, her cheeks flushed with a healthy glow, and her eyes bright with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. Good morning, she said softly, her gaze flickering between Robert and me. Morning, we both echoed, the word hanging in the air like a shared secret. The three of us stood in the kitchen, the silence stretching between us. It wasn't awkward exactly, but it was charged with something unspoken, something that needed to be addressed. Junior was the first to speak. So? Last night happened, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I glanced at her, my grip tightening on my mug. It did. Robert leaned against the counter, his eyes on me. And how do you feel about it? I hesitated, my mind racing as I tried to find the right words. How did I feel? Guilty, exhilarated, confused, alive? It was a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't quite untangle. I don't know, I admitted finally, it's complicated, but I don't regret it. Junior exhaled sharply as if she'd been holding her breath. Neither do I, she said, her voice firm despite the blush creeping up her cheeks. Robert nodded, his expression thoughtful. Me neither. The silence returned, but this time it was different, less tense, more contemplative. I took a sip of my coffee, the warm liquid soothing my frayed nerves. So? What now? Junior asked, her voice tentative. I looked at her, then at Robert, my mind racing. What now indeed? This was uncharted territory, a path I'd never imagined walking down. But as I looked at them, at the connection between us, I knew I couldn't just walk away. Before I could respond, Junior stepped closer to Robert, her hand resting on his arm. I think we should explore this, she said, her voice soft but firm. All three of us. Robert's eyes flicked to me, seeking my reaction. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying, but the pull I felt toward them was undeniable. Together? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Junior nodded, her eyes locked on mine. Together. Robert exhaled sharply, his hand reaching out to brush against mine. If you're both sure. Junior's smile was small but confident as she turned to Robert. I think we should start now. He raised an eyebrow, a smirk tugging at his lips. Now? She nodded, her cheeks flushing as she glanced at me. Michelle, what do you think? My breath caught in my throat, but I found myself nodding. If you're both comfortable. Junior leaned in, her lips brushing against Robert's in a soft, lingering kiss. Then she knelt in front of him, her hands moving to the waistband of his sweats. My heart raced as I watched, the air in the room growing heavy with anticipation. Robert's eyes met mine. His expression a mix of surprise and desire. Michelle. I stepped closer, my hand resting on his shoulder. Let her, I whispered, my voice trembling. Junior's movements were slow and deliberate, her touch gentle but confident. She glanced up at me, her eyes filled with a quiet intensity. Join me, she said softly. My heart pounded as I knelt beside her, my hands trembling as they joined hers. The connection between us was electric. The intimacy of the moment overwhelming. As the morning unfolded, we explored this new dynamic together. The boundaries between us dissolving into something raw and unfiltered. The room was filled with the sounds of our shared passion, the air thick with the scent of desire. When it was over, we sat together on the kitchen floor, our breathing slowly returning to normal. The silence was heavy, but it was also calm. A quiet understanding settling between us. This won't be easy, I said finally, breaking the silence. There are risks, complications. But if we're all on the same page, then maybe we can make it work. Robert's hand brushed against mine, his touch warm and reassuring. We'll take it one day at a time, he said, his voice steady. Junior reached out, her fingers intertwining with mine. Together, she added, her voice soft but filled with conviction. I looked at them, at the connection between us, and felt a surge of something I couldn't quite define. Hope, maybe, or something even stronger. Together, I agreed, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. The conversation ended there, but the unspoken agreement hung in the air like a silent promise. This was just the beginning, and whatever came next, we would face it together. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions, each moment blurring the lines between guilt, desire, and something deeper that I couldn't quite name. The dynamic between Robert, Jr., and me shifted in ways I never could have anticipated, transforming into something that defied societal norms and challenged my understanding of love, intimacy, and connection. At first, the guilt was overwhelming. I couldn't shake the feeling that what we were doing was wrong, that I was betraying some unspoken code of morality. Every glance, every touch, every whispered word between us felt forbidden, and I found myself questioning my own motives. Was I selfish for wanting this? Was I risking everything for something that could never last? But then there were the moments that made it all worth it. The way Robert's hand would brush against mine as we passed each other in the hallway, the softness in Junior's eyes when she smiled at me, the quiet intimacy of our shared mornings and late nights. Those moments felt real, honest, and undeniable. Robert and I in particular found ourselves drawn closer together. The boundaries that had once defined a relationship as stepmother and stepson blurred, replaced by a connection that was both tender and intense. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a quiet acknowledgement of the complexities of our feelings. One evening after Junior had gone to bed, Robert and I found ourselves alone in the living room. The silence between us was comfortable but charged, the air thick with unspoken words. Michelle, he said finally, his voice low and tentative. Do you ever regret it? I looked at him, my heart skipping a beat. Sometimes, I admitted. But not in the way you might think. I regret the guilt, the fear. But not what we're doing, not what we've become. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. I feel the same way, it's complicated but it feels right. I reached out, my hand resting on his. It does. That conversation marked a turning point for us. We began to communicate more openly, sharing our thoughts, fears, and desires. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of tension, of doubt. But we worked through them together, our connection deepening with each passing day. Junior remained an integral part of our dynamic, her presence adding balance and complexity to the relationship. She had a way of grounding us, her calm and thoughtful demeanor providing a counterpoint to the intensity between Robert and me. One afternoon, as the three of us sat together in the backyard, Junior turned to me, her expression serious. "Michelle, do you ever feel like this is too much?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "Sometimes," I said finally. "But then I look at both of you and I can't imagine it any other way." She smiled, her eyes softening. "Me neither. It's not what I expected, but it feels right." "You both feel right." Her words echoed my own feelings, and I felt a surge of gratitude for her presence in our lives. She was the glue that held us together, her understanding and acceptance allowing us to explore this unconventional relationship without fear of judgment. Despite the growing connection between us, I continued to grapple with feelings of guilt and confusion. There were nights when I lay awake, questioning my choices, wondering if I was leading us down a path that could only end in heartbreak. But then there were the moments that made it all worthwhile. The way Robert's arms felt around me, the sound of Junior's laughter, the quiet intimacy of our shared moments. Those moments reminded me why I had chosen this path, why I had chosen them. One night, as the three of us lay tangled together, the reality of our situation hit me with sudden clarity. This wasn't just about desire or curiosity, it was about connection, about finding something real and meaningful in a world that often felt empty and uncertain. "I love you both," I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. The room fell silent, and for a moment I wondered if I had said too much. But then Junior reached out, her fingers intertwining with mine. "I love you too," she said softly. Robert's arms tightened around me, his voice low and steady. "And I love you." Those words, simple yet profound, marked a turning point for us. We had crossed a line and there was no going back. But as I looked at them, at the connection we shared, I knew I didn't want to. As the weeks turned into months, we settled into a rhythm, our lives intertwining in ways both big and small. The outside world remained unaware of our unconventional relationship, and we were careful to keep it that way. But within the walls of our home, we found a sense of peace and belonging that I had never experienced before. There were challenges, of course. Moments of doubt, of fear, of uncertainty. But we faced them together, our bond growing stronger with each obstacle we overcame. The story ends on an uncertain but hopeful note, the future open to interpretation. What we had wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for now that was enough. The aftermath of our decision was both beautiful and complicated. Life didn't magically become easier. In fact, in many ways it became more challenging. But it also became richer, fuller, and more vibrant than I could have ever imagined. We learned to navigate the intricacies of our relationship, the three of us finding a balance that worked for us. It wasn't always seamless. There were moments of jealousy, moments of doubt, moments when the weight of what we were doing felt almost unbearable. But we talked. Always we talked. Communication became the cornerstone of our bond, the thing that held us together when everything else threatened to pull us apart. The guilt never fully disappeared, but it became quieter, less insistent. I learned to live with the contradictions, the way my heart soared when I was with them, the way my mind sometimes whispered that this was wrong. I came to understand that love isn't always neat or simple, that it doesn't always fit into the boxes society tries to put it in. Robert and I grew closer than I ever thought possible. Our relationship, once defined by the boundaries of step-family dynamics, evolved into something deeper, something that defied labels. He became my confidant, my partner, and in many ways my anchor. The way he looked at me, the way he touched me, was filled with a quiet intensity that made me feel seen, understood, and cherished. Junior was the steadying force in our trio, her calm and thoughtful presence bringing balance to the intensity between Robert and me. She had a way of diffusing tension with a simple smile, of reminding us to pause and appreciate the moment. Her love for Robert was unwavering, but so was her affection for me. And it was that duality that made our relationship work. The outside world remained unaware of the truth, and we were careful to keep it that way. We knew the risks, the judgment, the stigma, the potential fallout. And we weren't ready to face them. So we lived our lives in quiet defiance, finding moments of stolen intimacy in the safety of our home. It wasn't always easy. There were times when the secrecy felt suffocating, when I longed to shout my love for them from the rooftops, but those moments were fleeting, overshadowed by the joy and connection we shared. As I sit here now writing this, the future feels both uncertain and full of possibilities. We're taking it one day at a time, navigating this unconventional path with care and intention. I don't know what the future holds for us. Maybe we'll find a way to share our love openly, to embrace it without fear. Maybe we'll continue to live in the shadows, finding solace in the quiet moments we share. Or maybe this will all come crashing down, the weight of our choices too much to bear. But for now, I'm choosing to focus on the present, on the love and connection we've built. It's messy, it's complicated, and it's everything I never knew I needed. The story of us isn't perfect, but it's ours. And for now, that's enough. If you found this content interesting and want to follow more exciting videos, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with your friends if you think they'll enjoy this story too. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video in the future. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel.